If you had wandered through the forests of ancient Japan after sunset, there was always the quiet possibility that someone had noticed you long before you noticed them.
Not another traveler, not a wandering monk,
not even a hunter returning to his village, but a fox,
standing motionless beneath the cedar trees, its amber eyes watching silently from between drifting shadows.
For centuries, people across Japan believed that foxes were unlike any other creature that shared the land. They seemed unusually patient,
unusually clever, and somehow always just a little beyond human understanding. Many animals became part of Japanese folklore,
yet very few earned the same respect or inspired as many stories as the Kitsune.
Even today, when many people hear the word yokai, their Kitsune is often the first being that comes to mind. Unlike towering monsters or fearsome spirits, the Kitsune begins with something entirely ordinary.
A fox.
A creature that people genuinely encountered while walking through forests, crossing mountain trails, or working quietly in their rice fields. Perhaps that is why the stories survived for so many centuries. They never felt completely impossible. A traveler really could glimpse a fox disappearing into the trees. A farmer really might notice fresh footprints crossing a snowy path before sunrise. Children truly did hear distant cries echoing across quiet hills at night.
Reality gave the stories their foundation.
Imagination slowly built everything else. Across Japan, foxes have lived beside people for thousands of years. The Japanese islands offered them dense forests, open grasslands, rolling mountains, and countless rivers.
As villages slowly expanded across the countryside, the fox adapted alongside humanity.
It remained wild, yet never entirely distant. Sometimes it hunted mice among the fields. Sometimes it passed silently through the edge of a village after darkness had fallen. People saw them often enough to become familiar, yet never often enough to fully understand them. Perhaps that mystery was exactly what allowed the Kitsune to be born. The oldest Japanese writings already mention extraordinary foxes. As centuries passed, stories gathered around them like falling autumn leaves. One village remembered a fox that protected travelers. Another remembered one that delighted in harmless tricks. Farther north, people spoke of foxes appearing beneath winter moonlight. Along the western coast, fishermen told stories of strange lights dancing across empty shorelines.
No two tales were exactly alike,
yet all agreed upon one simple idea. The oldest foxes eventually became something more than ordinary animals. They became spirits, wise,
patient, ancient. The Kitsune was never simply measured by strength.
Instead, it became stronger through time.
Old Japanese folklore often speaks of the fox growing wiser with every passing century,
not through battle,
nor conquest, but through observation.
Watching the seasons change, watching forests grow, watching entire families live and disappear while mountains remained exactly the same. There's something quietly beautiful about that idea. Wisdom earned simply by living long enough to understand the world. Some legends say that once a Kitsune reached 100 years of age, it gained the ability to transform,
not into another fox, but into almost anything.
An elderly traveler, a wandering merchant, a monk climbing toward a mountain temple, or perhaps a young woman standing quietly beneath the branches of a maple tree. Transformation became one of the defining qualities of the Kitsune, yet the stories rarely described these disguises as acts of cruelty. More often, the fox wished to observe humanity, to understand people as closely as people had spent centuries trying to understand foxes. Sometimes the transformation became a lesson.
A proud man who judged strangers too quickly might later discover he had spoken harshly to a Kitsune. Someone who offered kindness without expecting reward might find unexpected good fortune soon after.
The message remained remarkably gentle. Treat everyone with respect, for appearances alone reveal very little.
As Japanese culture slowly developed, the Kitsune became deeply connected with one of the country's most important spiritual traditions, Shinto.
Among the many kami honored throughout Japan, one name appears again and again: Inari.
Known as the guardian of rice agriculture, prosperity, and later business itself.
Across Japan today, thousands of shrines are dedicated to Inari. Some are small village shrines surrounded by forests. Others stand within busy modern cities.
Yet many share one familiar sight:
stone foxes quietly standing near the entrance. Visitors often assume these foxes represent Inari. In truth, traditional belief describes them differently. They are the messengers, faithful companions carrying the wishes of people toward the kami they serve. Many hold small objects within their mouths:
a key, representing the rice storehouses; a jewel,
representing wisdom or spiritual power; sometimes a scroll, sometimes a sheaf of rice.
Each symbol quietly reflects the role the kitchen came to play within Japanese belief.
This connection may have begun in surprisingly practical ways. Rice determined whether families prospered or struggled.
Foxes hunted mice.
Mice threatened stored grain. A creature that protected harvests naturally became associated with abundance itself. Over generations, simple observations slowly became sacred tradition. Reality and folklore walked together, neither entirely separate from the other.
Another belief gradually emerged. As a kitchen continued growing old, it gained another tale, then another. Each new tale reflected greater wisdom, greater experience, and greater spiritual power. The oldest foxes were said to possess 9 tails. The 9-tailed kitchen became one of the most enduring images in Japanese folklore.
Though stories differ across East Asia, the idea remains remarkably consistent. The oldest beings are rarely the loudest. Their strength comes from patience. Their power comes from understanding. Many of Japan's oldest folktales quietly celebrate this kind of wisdom, not the wisdom of kings nor warriors,
but of those who watch carefully before acting, those who understand nature rather than trying to conquer it.
The kitsune became a reflection of that philosophy. One famous tradition speaks of mysterious lights appearing above lonely fields during the night, small blue flames dancing silently across the darkness. These became known as kitsune by fox fires. Travelers occasionally claimed they had followed these lights only to find themselves walking in circles until dawn.
Others insisted the lights merely floated peacefully before fading into the night.
Modern explanations suggest unusual natural gases or atmospheric effects, yet the old stories remain. Sometimes the explanation matters less than the feeling. Standing alone beneath a moonlit sky, watching strange lights drift across distant fields, it is easy to understand why generations before us imagined something extraordinary. Not every kitsune story involved trickery. Some became deeply touching. There are tales of foxes repaying kindness shown to an injured animal. Others tell of lonely spirits quietly protecting abandoned shrines through countless winters. Some stories even speak of lifelong companionship between humans and mysterious strangers whose true identity remained unknown until the very end.
The kitsune was never simply a trickster.
It reflected many different sides of life:
joy,
loneliness,
curiosity, patience, compassion, and occasionally quiet mischief.
Perhaps this complexity explains why the fox never disappeared from Japanese culture. Painters continued depicting kitsune upon delicate scrolls. Actors portrayed them upon the kabuki stage.
Poets compared their quiet elegance to moonlit forests.
Writers continued imagining new tales while preserving the oldest ones. Even today, visitors walking through places like Fushimi Inari pass hundreds of stone foxes standing silently beneath endless rows of vermilion torii gates.
Morning mist drifts between the paths.
Leaves rustle gently overhead. Footsteps echo softly upon ancient stone. The foxes remain exactly where they have always stood, patiently watching generations of travelers come and go. And perhaps that is the true reason the kitsune has endured for so many centuries. Not because people fear the fox, but because it represented something quietly familiar, the feeling that nature is always watching, that forests remember those who walk beneath their branches, and that somewhere just beyond the edge of certainty there are still mysteries that do not ask to be solved,
only respected,
only remembered,
and quietly carried forward like the whisper of wind moving gently through the cedar trees at the close of another peaceful evening. If you were a child growing up in an old Japanese village, there was one warning you would almost certainly hear before walking toward the river alone.
Do not stay too long by the water. Do not wander too close to the deepest pools. And above all, do not forget that someone else may already be waiting there.
Not every warning given to children was meant only to frighten them.
Some carried practical wisdom. Others carried ancient beliefs. Over time, the two became almost impossible to separate. Among the countless rivers that flowed from Japan's mountains, one creature appeared more often than almost any other.
The Kappa.
Today, many imagine the Kappa as a playful green creature with a shell upon its back. Its appearance has become familiar through books, television, and artwork. Yet the oldest stories described something far less certain. Each village imagined the Kappa a little differently.
Some believed it resembled a small child.
Others compared it to a turtle,
a monkey,
or even an unusual river spirit unlike any known animal. Only a few features remained remarkably consistent.
Its home was always the water. Its movements were quiet, and upon the top of its head rested a small hollow filled with water. According to tradition, that water was the source of its strength.
The rivers of Japan have always shaped everyday life. Long before modern roads, rivers connected villages. They watered rice fields, provided fish, turned water wheels, and carried travelers through narrow valleys.
Yet rivers also demanded respect. Strong currents could appear without warning.
Rain falling high in the mountains might transform a gentle stream into a dangerous torrent by afternoon. Children naturally loved to play beside the water.
Parents naturally worried. Perhaps the Kappa became one way of teaching caution without explaining every danger directly.
Instead of saying the current may pull you beneath the surface, the story simply became the Kappa is waiting.
Children remembered the warning,
and perhaps stayed a little farther from the deepest pools. In this way, folklore quietly protected everyday life.
Many stories described the Kappa as endlessly curious.
Rather than attacking everyone it encountered, it often seemed fascinated by people.
Watching fishermen cast their nets,
observing farmers working beside irrigation canals, listening to laughter drifting across village bridges. Sometimes the Kappa emerged only after sunset, when mist settled across the water and the sounds of daytime slowly faded away. Travelers occasionally claimed they heard splashing where nothing could be seen. Others believed they spotted a small figure disappearing beneath lily pads before vanishing completely. Whether these sightings truly happened mattered very little. The stories themselves continued flowing from generation to generation, much like the rivers that inspired them. One of the most unusual traditions surrounding the Kappa involved politeness.
Old Japanese tales often described the creature as exceptionally respectful.
If someone bowed deeply before a Kappa, the Kappa would instinctively bow in return.
When it did, the precious water held within the hollow of its head spilled onto the ground. Without that water, its strength disappeared.
Some versions say the Kappa immediately became weak. Others simply say it lost its supernatural power until the water was returned. This curious detail reveals something interesting about Japanese storytelling.
Victory did not always belong to the strongest.
Sometimes courtesy proved more powerful than force. Respect itself became a kind of quiet strength.
The Kappa also became associated with learning. Several old legends claim that grateful Kappa taught humans valuable knowledge after being treated kindly.
Some spoke of new farming methods.
Others mentioned medicine.
There were even stories suggesting that certain healing techniques passed between humans and river spirits long ago. Whether these tales reflected real discoveries or simply expressed gratitude toward nature, no one can truly know. Yet they remind us that yokai were not always enemies. Many occupied a place somewhere between friend and stranger.
Dangerous when treated carelessly, helpful when approached with respect. Across Japan, different regions developed their own Kappa traditions.
Some villages celebrated annual festivals connected to the river spirit. Others carved small statues near bridges or streams. Certain shrines even preserve objects said to have belonged to a Kappa centuries ago. Visitors still arrive today curious to hear the local stories. These traditions continue not because everyone believes the Kappa literally waits beneath the water, but because the stories themselves have become part of the landscape. They belong to the rivers just as naturally as smooth stones flowing water and willow trees bending gently above the current. As Japan entered more modern times, the Kappa changed alongside the country. Artists painted playful versions for children. Writers imagined thoughtful river spirits. Animated films introduced them to entirely new generations.
Yet despite these changes, the oldest lesson quietly remained.
Respect the water. Every river deserves care. Every stream deserves caution. Nature is generous but never completely predictable. On warm summer afternoons, Japanese rivers can appear wonderfully peaceful. Dragonflies drift above the surface. Fish glide silently through clear water.
The current whispers gently over rounded stones.
It is easy to forget how quickly that calmness can change. Storms arrive. Water rises. The familiar becomes unfamiliar. Perhaps that is why the Kappa endured for so many centuries. It gave a face and a personality to something people already understood instinctively. The river possessed its own spirit,
its own rhythm,
its own quiet power.
Even today, if you visit a secluded stream deep within the Japanese countryside, you may find yourself pausing for a moment before stepping closer, listening, watching,
allowing the sound of flowing water to fill the silence. And although you may never expect to see a Kappa emerge from beneath the rippling surface, you might still leave with the same feeling shared by countless travelers before you, that rivers remember every season, every village, every story, and somewhere beneath the endless movement of the current, old legends continue flowing quietly toward the sea. There are forests in Japan where people naturally begin speaking more quietly, not because anyone asks them to, but because the silence itself feels worthy of respect. The sunlight falls differently beneath ancient trees. The air becomes cooler. The scent of cedar and moss lingers after every rainfall. Even the sound of your own footsteps seems softer than before. For countless generations, people believed such places were never truly empty. Something older than humanity quietly lived among the trees. Not monsters, not gods, simply spirits that belonged to the forest itself.
These were known as Kodama.
Unlike many yokai, their Kodama rarely appeared clearly. In fact, many old stories insist they were almost never seen at all.
Instead, their presence was felt.
A strange stillness.
An echo returning from the mountains where no cliff should have reflected the sound.
A feeling that someone had quietly noticed your arrival. The word Kodama has long been connected with echoes. In old Japan, if someone called into a deep forest and heard their voice return, they sometimes believed it was not merely sound bouncing through the trees.
Perhaps the forest itself had answered. Perhaps the Kodama had replied.
It is a wonderfully gentle idea. Not every mystery needs an elaborate explanation. Sometimes the mountain simply speaks back. Japan has always been a mountainous country. Even today, much of the land remains covered in forests. Long before cities expanded across the islands, people depended upon these forests for almost everything.
Wood to build homes,
branches for fires, medicinal plants, fresh water flowing from mountain springs. Yet they also understood something equally important. If too much was taken, the forest would slowly disappear. Perhaps this is why the Kodama became such enduring spirits. They reminded people that forests were not possessions. They were living places deserving of care.
Many traditions held that particularly old trees became the home of Kodama.
Not every tree, only those that had quietly stood through countless generations.
Trees that had survived storms, snow,
summer heat, and centuries of changing seasons. Such trees often became sacred. Villagers sometimes tied a thick braided rope around the trunk,
known as a shamna, it quietly marked the tree as a place worthy of respect.
Even today, these sacred trees can still be found throughout Japan, standing beside shrines,
hidden within mountain forests, or growing peacefully at the edge of old villages.
Some are over 1,000 years old. Their trunks are so wide that several people together could barely reach around them.
Looking upon such trees, it becomes surprisingly easy to understand why earlier generations believed they possessed a spirit.
They seem almost timeless.
Many stories warned against cutting down a tree believed to house a Kodama.
Not because the spirit sought revenge through anger, but because disturbing something so ancient inevitably brought misfortune.
A healthy harvest might fail. Tools could break unexpectedly.
Travelers might lose their way. Whether these stories were believed literally mattered less than the lesson they carried. Treat old forests with respect. Do not destroy what has quietly stood for centuries simply because you can.
In this way, folklore often became another form of conservation,
protecting nature through stories rather than lores.
As Buddhism and Shinto continued shaping Japanese culture, the idea that nature possessed its own quiet spirit became even more deeply rooted. Mountains, waterfalls, rivers,
and forests were not separate from everyday life. They formed part of the same living world.
The Kodama came to represent that invisible connection.
Not demanding worship, only consideration. Unlike many yokai, very few stories describe the Kodama frightening travelers. Instead, people often believe they gently watched over the places they called home. An old cedar standing beside a mountain trail, a grove of cypress surrounding a hidden shrine, a quiet valley untouched by villages. These became places where people naturally lowered their voices,
not from fear,
but from respect. Even modern visitors often describe a similar feeling, walking through ancient forests such as those on Yakushima Island or beneath towering cedar trees in quiet mountain temples. Many people instinctively slow their pace. The world seems calmer. Time itself feels less hurried. Perhaps nothing supernatural has happened at all. Or perhaps the oldest stories simply gave a name to a feeling people have always experienced. The feeling that some places deserve silence.
Artists throughout Japanese history found endless inspiration in forests.
Paintings often showed towering trees disappearing into mist. Poets wrote of wind moving gently through cedar branches. Writers imagined quiet spirits watching from among the leaves. The Kodama appeared not because they demanded attention, but because they blended so completely into the landscape.
Their greatest power may have been their invisibility. A reminder that not everything valuable needs to be seen.
Even today, foresters occasionally leave particularly old trees standing untouched while harvesting younger timber nearby. Shrines continue caring for sacred groves. Visitors still pause before enormous ancient trunks. Whether one believes in Kodama or not, the tradition continues encouraging something deeply worthwhile.
Gratitude, patience, respect for places older than ourselves.
As evening settles across a mountain forest, the light gradually fades beneath the canopy. Birdsong becomes quieter. A cool breeze carries the scent of damp earth and cedar. Somewhere in the distance, a single call echoes softly through the trees.
Then another.
Perhaps it is only sound returning through the valley. Or perhaps as generations before quietly imagine the forest has answered once again. Not to frighten those who walk beneath its branches, only to remind them that long before the first path was cleared, long before the first shrine was built, the trees were already here, patiently growing, patiently listening, and patiently remembering every season that passed beneath their leaves. High above the villages of ancient Japan, where winding mountain paths disappeared beneath towering cedar trees, people believed there were places where the ordinary world slowly gave way to another. The air became thinner, the forests grew quieter. Even the wind seemed to carry a different voice among the branches. Travelers rarely hurried through these mountains, not because the climb was difficult, but because the mountains had always commanded respect. For countless generations, the peaks of Japan were never seen as empty wilderness.
They were sacred places,
homes of wandering monks, ancient shrines, hidden waterfalls, and according to many old stories, the mysterious beings known as the Tengu. Among all the yokai of Japan, few have changed as much throughout history as the Tengu. The earliest stories described them as dangerous spirits carried upon fierce mountain winds.
Later generations imagined them as guardians of sacred forests.
masters of martial discipline, teachers of wisdom. The image continued evolving with every passing century, yet one thing remained unchanged. The Tengu always belonged to the mountains. Unlike rivers, mountains ask for patience. Every step upward requires effort. The farther one climbs, the quieter the world becomes. Villages disappear below, roads grow narrow. The scent of cedar replaces the smell of cooking fires.
Perhaps it was only natural that people imagined extraordinary beings living in places so few regularly visited.
Early paintings often portrayed the Tengu with wings, powerful feathers stretching from their backs. Some possessed the face of a great bird. Others gradually became more human in appearance, though one unusual feature remained: a remarkably long nose. Today this has become one of the defining characteristics of the Tengu.
Yet historians believe this image developed only gradually over hundreds of years.
Folklore rarely stands still. It quietly changes alongside the people who tell it. Many stories describe the Tengu as highly skilled warriors.
Not soldiers serving kingdoms, but masters who devoted themselves to discipline. Their home was not a castle, it was the mountain itself.
Hidden temples nestled among ancient forests, steep cliffs overlooking quiet valleys,
remote places where few people ever wandered.
Because of this, the Tengu eventually became closely connected with the Yamabushi, mountain ascetics who sought spiritual understanding through long journeys into Japan's wilderness. The Yamabushi believed that wisdom could often be found far from crowded towns.
They climbed mountains,
meditated beneath waterfalls, walked lonely forest paths, and spent long periods living among nature. Over time, stories began weaving these dedicated practitioners together with the legendary Tengu. Some believe the greatest mountain masters became almost like Tengu themselves.
Others imagine the Tengu quietly teaching worthy students who demonstrated patience and humility.
Whether these stories were meant literally or simply honored the wisdom of mountain life, no one can say with certainty. One lesson appears again and again. Pride rarely survives the mountains.
Many tales begin with a boastful warrior certain of his own skill. He climbs toward a distant shrine seeking glory.
Somewhere along the journey he encounters a mysterious stranger,
an elderly monk,
a traveler, someone whose appearance seems entirely ordinary. Only later does the proud warrior realize he has been speaking with a Tengu. His confidence slowly gives way to humility, not through violence, but through understanding. The mountains have a quiet way of reminding people how small they truly are. Standing upon a high ridge looking across endless forests stretching toward the horizon, it becomes difficult to imagine oneself as the center of the world. Perhaps this is exactly why so many stories place the Tengu there. They became guardians not only of the mountains but of humility itself. Japanese forests often produce unusual sounds. Strong winds move differently through cedar branches than through ordinary trees.
Valleys create echoes.
Birds call from unseen heights. Branches creak gently against one another. To travelers walking alone, such sounds could easily seem mysterious.
A sudden gust might appear without warning.
Leaves swirl across the path. A distant laugh, or perhaps only a bird's cry, echoes somewhere overhead.
The imagination quietly completes the story.
Throughout history, artists painted the Tengu in many different ways. Some appeared fierce,
others thoughtful. Some smiled.
Others remained impossible to read.
Yet almost all stood among mountains.
Their robes moved gently in the wind.
Ancient pine trees surrounded them.
Clouds drifted beneath distant peaks. The landscape itself became just as important as the figure. It reminded people that the Tengu belonged to a world where nature always came first. Many mountain temples throughout Japan still preserve legends connected to the Tengu. Visitors hear stories passed down for generations. A strange encounter upon a lonely trail, an unexpected guide appearing during heavy mist, footprints leading nowhere.
Whether these events truly occurred matters less than the atmosphere they create.
The mountains become places of quiet reflection, not simply destinations. Even today, those who hike through Japan's mountain forests often describe an unusual calmness. The constant sounds of modern life slowly disappear. Only birdsong remains, wind moving through cedar branches, water flowing somewhere beyond the trees. Every breath feels deeper, every step a little slower. It becomes easy to understand why generations before imagined wise spirits living in such places. The Tengu were never simply creatures of fantasy. They represented something far older, the belief that mountains shaped those willing to climb them,
that silence teaches lessons impossible to hear elsewhere,
that strength without humility is incomplete, and that true wisdom often waits far beyond the busiest roads.
As evening settles across the highest ridges, clouds drift slowly between the peaks.
The last sunlight touches the cedar forests before fading into blue twilight. The mountain grows quiet once more. Somewhere beyond the next bend in the trail hidden among ancient trees, one might imagine an old Tengu still watching peacefully over the forests it has called home for countless centuries.
Patiently, silently,
allowing every traveler to continue their journey while the mountains remain exactly as they have always been.
Unquiet evenings when the day's work had finally ended and the last light of the sun slipped behind Japan's distant mountains, the roads between villages became wonderfully peaceful. Merchants made their final journey home.
Farmers carried empty baskets across narrow paths. The sound of flowing rivers slowly replaced the voices of busy markets.
It was during these calm twilight hours that many people believed another familiar resident of the countryside quietly began its own journey. Not a fox,
nor a spirit of the mountains,
but the Tanuki.
Today the Tanuki is often called the Japanese raccoon dog. Despite its name, it is not closely related to the raccoon. Instead, it belongs to the dog family. For thousands of years it has wandered the forests, hills, and countryside of Japan. Unlike creatures that avoid human settlements completely, the Tanuki adapted remarkably well. It often lived near villages, searching for fruit, insects, small animals, or simply exploring the edge of the forest after darkness had fallen. Because people encountered the Tanuki so often, it naturally found its way into countless stories. Yet, unlike many yokai, the Tanuki rarely inspired fear. Instead, it became known for something much gentler:
mischief.
The old stories describe the Tanuki as endlessly curious. It enjoyed confusing travelers,
moving small objects, creating harmless illusions,
or quietly reminding people not to take life too seriously. Very rarely did these tricks bring lasting harm.
Instead, they left behind puzzled smiles.
A traveler might swear the road had become longer than before. A familiar path somehow led somewhere unexpected. A tea house appeared where none had stood the previous evening.
Then by morning everything seemed perfectly ordinary once again. Perhaps the Tanuki had simply grown bored and decided to entertain itself for the night.
Unlike the Kitsune, whose stories often carried lessons about wisdom and transformation, the Tanuki represented joy, adaptability, and the simple pleasure of surprising people.
Many folktales describe the creature laughing quietly to itself after another harmless trick had succeeded.
It reminds us that folklore does not always need great battles or powerful magic. Sometimes a gentle smile is enough. One of the Tanuki's best-known abilities was transformation.
Like the Kitsune, it could change its appearance.
Yet the purpose felt very different. The fox often transformed to test character or observe humanity. The Tanuki transformed simply because it enjoyed the experience.
It became wandering monks,
old merchants,
children,
travelers,
even ordinary household objects.
Not to deceive with cruel intentions, but to play, to explore, to satisfy endless curiosity.
Over time, these playful stories spread across the country.
Each region added its own version.
Some villages believed a particular old tree belonged to a mischievous Tanuki.
Others spoke of unusual footprints appearing after fresh snowfall. Children eagerly listened. Adults smiled quietly. The stories became another thread woven into everyday life. Perhaps the most famous image of the Tanuki today appears outside restaurants and small shops across Japan.
Ceramic statues,
standing patiently beside the entrance, wide-brimmed straw hats resting upon their heads, a bottle of sake held comfortably in one paw, a welcoming smile upon their face. Visitors often wonder why these cheerful figures appear almost everywhere. Their meaning reaches back through centuries of folklore.
The hat represents protection during life's unexpected journeys.
The bottle symbolizes generosity. The large belly reminds people to approach life with confidence and good humor. The smile welcomes guests with warmth rather than suspicion. These statues became symbols of hospitality,
good fortune,
and prosperity. Many restaurant owners quietly hope the cheerful Tanuki will encourage visitors to step inside. Whether one believes the old legends or not, the tradition continues.
There is something comforting about seeing the same smiling figure greeting travelers decade after decade.
The Tanuki also teaches another lesson: adaptation. Japan itself has changed enormously across the centuries. Quiet villages became growing towns. Horse trails became highways. Lanterns gave way to electric lights.
Yet the Tanuki remained.
Even today, wild Tanuki continue living surprisingly close to modern cities, sometimes appearing late at night when the streets have become quiet once more. People occasionally glimpse one crossing an empty road before disappearing into nearby trees. For just a moment, the modern world and the old stories quietly meet.
Artists throughout Japanese history delighted in painting the Tanuki.
Unlike fierce warriors or powerful dragons, the Tanuki often appeared relaxed,
laughing, playing music,
sharing food, resting beneath autumn leaves. Its stories reflected ordinary happiness. Perhaps that is why they endured. Not every legend must inspire awe. Some simply remind us to enjoy the simple moments already surrounding us. An evening breeze, a quiet forest path,
the laughter of friends gathered around a warm meal.
These ordinary experiences become extraordinary only after they have quietly passed. The Tanuki seem to understand this better than anyone. As twilight slowly settles across the Japanese countryside, the last birds return to their nests.
Crickets begin their evening song.
The air grows cooler. A narrow path disappears beneath old maple trees. Somewhere just beyond the reach of the fading light, a small figure pauses for a moment,
watching another traveler continue peacefully toward home.
Perhaps it smiles quietly to itself. Perhaps it considers one harmless trick before deciding against it. Or perhaps it simply continues its own evening walk beneath the stars, hidden among the countless ordinary moments that quietly become the folklore of another generation. Not every yokai of ancient Japan lived deep within forests or wandered lonely mountain paths. Some, according to old stories, never left the house at all. They quietly shared it with the family who lived there.
Long before electric lights, before modern cities, and before homes became separated from nature, Japanese houses were built almost entirely from wood.
Their floors rested slightly above the ground. Tatami mats covered the rooms. Paper screens allowed sunlight to drift softly inside during the day. At night, only the gentle glow of an oil lamp or a small lantern remained. The house itself breathed with the seasons. Summer breezes passed through open doors. Winter winds creaked softly against old wooden beams. Rain tapped gently upon the roof. Every sound became familiar.
Every corner held its own quiet personality.
Perhaps it is no surprise that people eventually imagine certain homes becoming alive in their own way. Among the gentlest spirits ever spoken of was the Zashiki-warashi. Unlike many yokai, its appearance inspired almost no fear. Old stories often described it as a young child,
usually no older than 10 years of age, wearing simple traditional clothing. Its face remained cheerful,
its footsteps almost silent. Few people ever claimed to see the Zashiki-warashi directly. Instead, they noticed small things. Footsteps crossing an empty hallway, the faint sound of laughter somewhere upstairs, a sliding paper door moving ever so slightly though no wind entered the room. Children sometimes insisted they had found a new playmate. Parents smiled gently, believing it to be imagination, yet the stories continued. For centuries, families believed that a home visited by a Zashiki-warashi became unusually fortunate. Harvests remained plentiful. Illness seemed less frequent. Business prospered.
Guests arrived with good news. The house itself felt warm, welcoming, peaceful.
In this way, the little spirit became closely associated with happiness. Unlike spirits that demanded offerings or prayers, the Zashiki-warashi asked for almost nothing.
Simply allowing it to remain was considered enough.
Many old inns across northern Japan still preserve rooms said to be visited by these mysterious spirits. Owners quietly tell visitors, if you hear footsteps tonight, do not be afraid. Some travelers smile politely.
Others become unexpectedly curious.
Whether anything unusual happens depends entirely upon the story. One of the most fascinating parts of the legend is what happens when the spirit leaves. Old tales often say their family's good fortune quietly disappears.
Prosperous homes gradually fall into hardship.
Successful businesses slowly decline. The house begins feeling strangely empty, not haunted, simply lonely. It is a gentle kind of sadness, the absence of something kind rather than the arrival of something frightening. Perhaps these stories reflected something deeply human. A joyful home is not built from wood alone. It is built from laughter,
shared meals,
children running through hallways,
quiet evenings spent together.
When those moments disappear, even the warmest house can suddenly feel empty. The Zashiki-warashi became a symbol of that invisible warmth. The spirit itself mattered less than what it represented. Many legends describe the spirit enjoying simple games.
Small toys left where no one remembered placing them.
Tiny footprints appearing in fresh ash beside the hearth. A spinning top gently rolling across the floor before coming to rest. Nothing dangerous.
Nothing cruel.
Only little reminders that another quiet resident perhaps shared the home. Japanese folklore often carries this remarkable gentleness. Rather than filling every mystery with few many stories, choose comfort instead. Not every unseen presence wishes to harm. Some simply wish to belong.
The architecture of traditional Japanese homes may have encouraged such imagination.
Wood naturally expands and contracts with changing temperatures. Floors creak softly during the night.
Paper screens rustle gently.
Old beams settle almost silently after sunset. To someone lying awake beneath the warm glow of a lantern, the house itself almost seemed alive. The Zashiki-warashi quietly gave those sounds a friendly face. As centuries passed, the little spirit became beloved throughout parts of Japan.
Artists painted cheerful children peeking around paper doors.
Writers collected local stories from village elders.
Even today, some historic inns proudly preserve the tradition surrounding the Zashiki-warashi.
Visitors occasionally leave small toys in the room,
not because they expect anything in return,
but because traditions sometimes survive simply through kindness. There is something wonderfully peaceful about these stories. Unlike dragons, fox spirits, or mountain guardians, the Zashiki-warashi reminds us that happiness often lives within ordinary places. A quiet home,
a family gathered together,
the sound of rain outside, the warmth of shared evenings. Perhaps those simple moments are themselves a kind of good fortune.
As night settles over an old wooden house, the lantern grows dim.
The hallway becomes quiet. Outside, the wind moves gently through the garden. Inside, a floorboard gives the faintest creak, almost too soft to notice.
Perhaps it is only old timber settling after another long day.
Or perhaps somewhere beyond the paper screens, a small child quietly walks the familiar halls once more, keeping watch over a home filled not with riches but with warmth, the kind of warmth that generations have always hoped would remain long after the lantern's final light has gently faded into the night. There is an old belief in Japan that even the simplest objects quietly remember. A paper umbrella carried through countless seasons, a wooden sandal worn smooth by years of walking, a well-used lantern that faithfully illuminated long winter nights, an old tea kettle placed upon the fire every morning. Each object quietly witnessed the lives of those around it, the laughter of children, the passing of grandparents, the changing of the seasons, the slow passage of time itself.
Most people never thought twice about these ordinary belongings. Yet according to one of Japan's most unusual traditions, time alone possessed a remarkable kind of power.
If an object faithfully served its owner for 100 years, it might awaken.
Not through magic cast by another, not through a curse.
Simply because it had existed for so long. These awakened objects became known as Tsukumogami. Among all the yokai, few are as uniquely Japanese in spirit as the Tsukumogami. They remind us that even ordinary things deserve appreciation, that usefulness itself carries quiet dignity, and that nothing should be discarded thoughtlessly simply because it has grown old. This idea appeared most clearly during Japan's medieval period.
As cities slowly expanded, people accumulated more possessions than previous generations.
Old tools were replaced, broken household items thrown away. Yet storytellers wondered what became of those forgotten belongings. Had they not served faithfully for decades? Had they not quietly shared every ordinary day alongside their owners? Perhaps they deserved to be remembered too. Many Tsukumogami stories begin not with anger but with loneliness.
An old umbrella left forgotten inside a dusty storehouse.
A lantern no longer lit after generations of faithful service. A worn wooden comb quietly resting inside an abandoned house. These objects had once been valued, used every day,
handled with care. Now silence surrounded them.
Over many years, the stories imagined these forgotten companions slowly awakening, not to seek revenge, but simply to continue existing in a world that had moved on without them. Some became playful, others wandered peacefully beneath the moonlight. A few enjoyed surprising travelers before disappearing once more into the darkness. Perhaps the best-known Tsukumogami is the Karsorobake,
an old paper umbrella, one eye, one leg,
a long tongue. Modern illustrations often portray it hopping cheerfully through rainy streets. Its appearance seems almost humorous. Children smile when they see it, yet beneath the playful design rests a gentle lesson. Even an umbrella deserves gratitude after years of keeping someone dry through countless storms. Other objects also found new life within folklore.
Old sandals, tea kettles,
musical instruments,
writing brushes,
paper lanterns, even folding screens. Almost anything carefully crafted by human hands could eventually become a Tsukumogami. It is an unusually optimistic way of viewing the world.
Rather than seeing old possessions as useless, the stories quietly suggested they continued carrying value.
Only in a different form. This way of thinking reflects something deeply rooted within Japanese culture. For centuries, craftsmanship has been held in remarkably high regard.
A skilled carpenter,
a careful potter, a patient swordsmith, each devoted years to mastering their work. The objects they created were never meant to be temporary. They were built to serve generations. Perhaps the Tsukumogami emerged as a way of honoring both the craftsman and the object itself. Many temples even held ceremonies for worn-out tools.
Needles no longer sharp enough for sewing,
brushes too old for writing. These were not simply discarded.
They were thanked.
Their service acknowledged before they were respectfully retired. Even today, some of these traditions continue. It is a quiet reminder that gratitude can extend beyond people,
toward the objects that quietly make everyday life possible.
As Japan changed, the stories changed too. Artists imagined cheerful umbrellas dancing beneath the rain,
animated scrolls filled with smiling household objects.
Rather than frightening audiences, the Tsukumogami often brought laughter. Their world became wonderfully imaginative. A procession of old lanterns wandering beneath the moon, tea kettles chatting softly beside forgotten fireplaces, sandals walking patiently along empty village roads after midnight. It is difficult not to smile while imagining such scenes. Perhaps that is exactly why these stories survived. They transformed ordinary life into something quietly magical. The next time someone reached for an old lantern or unfolded a weathered umbrella, they remembered, perhaps this object has its own story too. Not every lesson carried by the Tsukumogami concerns the supernatural. Some speak directly to modern life.
We often replace things long before they truly wear out.
We move quickly from one possession to another, yet older generations frequently repaired,
Reused.
and cared for what they already owned. The Tsukumogami quietly celebrates that patience, not through lectures, but through imagination. Treat your belongings well.
Value the work that created them. Remember that usefulness itself deserves respect. As evening rain begins falling across an old Japanese village, paper lanterns glow softly beneath the eaves.
Umbrellas open one by one as people walk home along narrow stone streets. The rain continues gently through the night.
Most umbrellas are folded and placed carefully beside the doorway before sleep.
The house grows quiet.
The lantern fades.
Outside, raindrops continue tapping softly against the roof. And somewhere, perhaps in another quiet village untouched by time, an old umbrella stretches its single leg, looks up toward the falling rain, and happily begins another peaceful walk beneath the moonlit sky. There are few places quieter than the mountains of Japan after fresh snowfall. The forests seem to pause. Branches bow gently beneath blankets of white. Footprints disappear almost as quickly as they are made. Even the wind, though cold, carries a remarkable stillness. For centuries, winter transformed the Japanese landscape into something almost dreamlike.
Villages became isolated.
Mountain passes disappeared beneath deep snow.
Travelers waited patiently for storms to pass before continuing their journey.
Nature itself seemed to ask everyone to slow down. It was within these silent winters that one of Japan's most enduring yokai quietly emerged.
The Yuki-onna.
The woman of snow. Unlike many spirits remembered through playful stories, the Yuki-onna belonged to the deepest days of winter, to lonely mountain roads, to frozen rivers, and to nights when snowfall covered every familiar landmark. Her appearance remains remarkably consistent throughout much of Japan. A woman dressed in white, long dark hair resting softly upon her shoulders, skin as pale as fresh snow beneath moonlight.
She moved without leaving footprints. She spoke quietly. Sometimes she did not seem to touch the ground at all. Yet despite this familiar image, the stories surrounding her differ greatly from one region to another.
Some describe her as sorrowful,
others as mysterious.
A few portray her as dangerous. Many simply leave her impossible to understand. Perhaps that uncertainty is exactly what has allowed the legend to survive for so many centuries. Winter itself is difficult to understand, beautiful yet unforgiving,
peaceful yet capable of extraordinary power. The Yuki-onna became almost a reflection of the season itself.
Many old stories begin during heavy snowfall. A traveler loses sight of the road. The familiar path disappears beneath drifting snow. Trees become pale shadows against the white landscape.
Night falls earlier than expected.
The cold grows deeper with every passing hour. Then far ahead someone appears, standing quietly among the falling snow. Whether she has come to help or whether she simply watches in silence depends entirely upon a version being told. Long before weather forecasts, mountain rescue teams, or reliable winter roads, snowstorms genuinely threatened lives. Travelers often depended upon the kindness of strangers to survive. It is easy to imagine how extraordinary such encounters must have seemed. A warm light appearing through the storm, a distant figure leading someone safely toward shelter, or perhaps only exhaustion creating comforting illusions during desperate moments. Over generations, reality and folklore quietly became inseparable. One of the oldest and most beloved tales tells of two woodcutters caught in a violent snowstorm.
Unable to continue, they find shelter inside a small mountain hut.
The younger man sleeps. The older quietly watches the storm beyond the doorway. During the night, a woman clothed entirely in white enters without making a sound. She moves gently through the cold air. Her breath becomes pale mist.
She approaches the older traveler first.
The morning storm has passed. The younger woodcutter survives. The older does not. Yet before leaving, the mysterious woman whispers a single request. Tell no one of what happened here. Years later, the surviving woodcutter builds a peaceful life. He marries a gentle woman whose beauty seems strangely familiar. Together they raise children. They share ordinary days, simple happiness, the passing seasons.
Only after many years one quiet winter evening he remembers the promise he made long ago. Without thinking, he tells his wife about the strange woman he met during the snowstorm.
She listens silently, then slowly reveals that she herself is the Yuki-onna. Some versions say she disappears immediately. Others tell us she spares him because of their children. The ending changes from village to village, yet the feeling remains remarkably gentle. Not every love story is meant to last forever. Some simply become memories carried quietly through life. Many scholars believe the Yuki-onna became one of Japan's most enduring figures because she captures something deeply familiar, the strange beauty of winter. Anyone who has walked through heavy snowfall understands its unusual silence. Sounds seem softer, distances become uncertain, the world itself appears transformed. Snow hides familiar paths, smooths rough landscapes, turns ordinary villages into places that feel almost untouched by time. The Yuki-onna belongs perfectly within such scenery. Artists have painted her for centuries, sometimes standing alone beneath falling snow, sometimes looking quietly across frozen rivers, sometimes disappearing into the white mountains before sunrise. Rarely does she appear angry. More often she appears distant, as though she herself belongs entirely to the winter landscape.
Japanese literature continued returning to her story again and again.
Each generation imagined her differently. Some emphasized compassion, others loneliness. Still others simply celebrated the extraordinary beauty of snow-covered Japan. Perhaps every version reveals something about the people who told it. Even today, visitors from around the world travel to northern Japan during winter. Snow falls silently across cedar forests. Steam rises gently from mountain hot springs. Traditional villages glow warmly beneath thick white rooftops. The beauty feels almost unreal. Standing there watching snowflakes drift slowly through the night, it becomes remarkably easy to understand why earlier generations imagined elegant spirits walking quietly through the storm. Perhaps the Yuki-onna has never existed merely as a yokai. Perhaps she became the spirit of winter itself, a reminder that nature can be breathtakingly beautiful while also deserving our deepest respect. As another winter evening settles across the mountains, snow continues falling without hurry. The forest grows quieter still. Moonlight reflects softly across untouched fields. Far beyond the nearest village, a solitary figure moves gracefully between the cedar trees.
Not searching,
not fleeing, simply becoming part of the snowfall itself. And before the first light of dawn reaches the mountain, she is gone once more, leaving behind nothing except fresh snow and another story carried gently into the next winter.
If you had asked people across old Japan which yokai ruled over all the others, many would have given the same answer:
Nurarihyon.
Yet unlike towering monsters or fearsome spirits hidden deep within forgotten mountains, the one many called the leader of the yokai looked surprisingly ordinary. An elderly man, calm, well-dressed, walking with the quiet confidence of someone who had nowhere urgent to be.
That was perhaps what made him so memorable. He did not demand attention.
He simply behaved as though he already belonged. The oldest stories describe Nurarihyon arriving during the late afternoon.
When the day's work had nearly finished, farmers were returning home. Merchants closed their shops. Smoke drifted gently upward from evening meals being prepared. Doors remained open.
Neighbors greeted one another before night settled across the village. It was during this peaceful hour that an unfamiliar old gentleman might quietly appear.
No one remembered seeing him arrive.
Yet somehow he was already inside the house. He would remove his sandals politely,
sit comfortably upon the tatami floor, pour himself a cup of tea,
and relax as though he had lived there his entire life. The family often reacted with quiet confusion.
Who was this man?
Why did he seem so familiar? No one wished to appear disrespectful toward an elderly guest, so they hesitated.
That hesitation became the heart of the story. Nurarihyon never forced his way into a home.
He simply acted with such complete confidence that everyone around him quietly accepted his presence.
There is something strangely amusing about the tale.
Unlike many yokai's greatest ability was not strength, nor magic, it was certainty.
People naturally assumed someone behaving so comfortably must surely belong there.
Perhaps old storytellers were gently reminding listeners how easily confidence can shape perception. The stories surrounding Nurarihyon changed greatly from region to region. Some portrayed him as harmless,
a wandering spirit who enjoyed warm tea and peaceful evenings before quietly disappearing again.
Others described him as a trickster, leaving families scratching their heads after realizing they had served dinner to a complete stranger.
Rarely did the stories become frightening. Instead, they remained wonderfully peculiar. One unusual evening in ordinary home became slightly less ordinary, and by morning everything returned to normal.
Many scholars believe Nurarihyon became especially popular during Japan's Edo period.
Cities had grown larger. Travelers moved constantly between towns. Strangers appeared more frequently than before. People welcomed guests with politeness, yet also wondered who these unfamiliar faces might truly be.
Nurarihyon quietly reflected those changing times. He represented the mysterious stranger,
the visitor whose story no one quite knew.
As Japanese artists began creating illustrated books filled with yokai, Nurarihyon often appeared leading long nighttime processions of spirits. This gathering became known as the Haikyagyo, the night parade of 100 demons.
Countless yokai wandered together beneath the moon,
some playful,
some strange, some impossible to describe.
And at the very front, the elderly Nurarihyon calmly led the procession.
Not through fear,
but through quiet dignity.
Whether he truly ruled the yokai remains uncertain. Many old stories never say so directly. Instead, the title slowly emerged through later generations. Perhaps because leadership itself often appears unexpectedly.
Not always through loud voices.
Sometimes through calm presence. Even today, people continue debating exactly what Nurarihyon was meant to represent.
Was he truly yokai, a spirit,
a symbol of confidence, or simply one more wonderfully imaginative tale passed between generations?
Perhaps the answer matters less than the atmosphere he leaves behind. Unlike dramatic legends filled with battles and impossible powers, his story unfolds inside an ordinary home, a familiar place,
a warm cup of tea,
the quiet sound of evening conversation.
The extraordinary gently enters the ordinary, then quietly leaves again. Many of Japan's oldest stories work in exactly this way.
Rather than transporting listeners into distant fantasy, invite mystery into everyday life.
A familiar forest, a quiet river,
an old umbrella,
a snowy mountain,
a family home.
Nothing changes dramatically. Only one small detail becomes impossible to explain. Perhaps that has always been the greatest strength of Japanese folklore.
It asks very little of the imagination,
only enough to wonder.
As evening slowly settles across another village, lanterns begin glowing behind paper windows.
Families gather for the final meal of the day. Outside, crickets sing softly beneath the fading light. A gentle breeze moves through the bamboo.
Far along the narrow road, an elderly traveler approaches at an unhurried pace. His footsteps make almost no sound. His expression remains peaceful. He reaches a small wooden house.
The door stands slightly open.
Warm light spills quietly onto the garden path. Without hurry, he removes his sandals,
steps inside, and sits comfortably beside the hearth. Someone offers him a cup of tea.
Another smiles politely. For a little while, everyone simply enjoys the peaceful evening together. By morning, the old traveler has disappeared. No one remembers exactly when he left.
Only one untouched teacup remains quietly resting beside the fire. Outside, the first light of dawn reaches the distant mountains. Another day begins.
And somewhere far beyond the next quiet village, an elderly yokai continues his slow journey along the peaceful roads of old Japan, always arriving without announcement,
always leaving without farewell.
and always reminding those who hear his story that the most extraordinary mysteries sometimes enter our lives as quietly as an unexpected guest sharing a warm cup of tea. If you were walking home alone through the streets of old Japan, there was one piece of advice that appeared again and again.
Do not let the darkness hurry you.
Walk steadily.
Keep your lantern close.
And if you happen to meet another traveler, offer a polite greeting before continuing on your way.
For most evenings, nothing unusual happened.
The roads remained peaceful.
A cool breeze drifted between the houses. The distant sound of flowing water echoed beneath old wooden bridges.
Crickets filled the silence.
The moon quietly watched over the village, yet every so often someone returned home with a story so unusual that it remained whispered for generations, not of a great monster, nor of a fearsome spirit,
but of an ordinary person who suddenly became anything but ordinary.
This was the legend of the Noppera-bō,
the Faceless One.
Unlike many yaka, the Noppera-bō possessed no claws,
no fangs,
no supernatural strength.
At first glance it appeared completely human.
A fisherman standing beside a river, a woman sitting quietly beneath a willow tree, an elderly traveler resting near a lonely shrine. Everything seemed perfectly normal, until someone looked a little closer.
Then, without warning, the face simply disappeared. No eyes, no nose, no mouth.
Only smooth, pale skin where a familiar face should have been. It is one of the simplest images in Japanese folklore, yet perhaps because of its simplicity it has remained one of the most unforgettable. Many of the oldest stories begin in remarkably ordinary places. A quiet bridge, a moonlit road, a lonely temple. The listener is never carried into some impossible fantasy. Instead, the extraordinary quietly enters the familiar. One famous tale tells of a merchant walking home late one evening.
His work had ended long after sunset.
The streets had grown almost empty.
Only the gentle glow of lanterns remained outside a few houses.
As he crossed a wooden bridge, he noticed a young woman sitting alone beside the water. Her shoulders trembled softly.
It seemed as though she were crying.
Concerned merchant approached carefully.
He asked whether she needed help.
For several moments she remained perfectly still. Then she slowly turned toward him. Where her face should have been, there was nothing at all. The frightened merchant fled into the darkness.
His footsteps echoed wildly through the empty streets until he reached a nearby food stall. Breathless, he desperately explained what he had just witnessed.
The old shopkeeper listened patiently, then nodded with quiet understanding.
"I see," he said softly. "You mean like this?" And as the merchant watched, the shopkeeper gently passed his hand across his own face.
It disappeared completely. Whether the story truly frightened people or simply delighted them with its unexpected ending, no one can say. But it has remained one of Japan's most famous ghost stories for centuries. Interestingly, many scholars believe the Noppera-bō rarely represented evil. Instead, it represented uncertainty, the feeling that appearances cannot always be trusted. How often do we assume we understand someone simply because we recognize their face? The Faceless One quietly removes that certainty, leaving only mystery behind. The legend also reminds us how powerfully the human mind fills empty spaces.
A lonely road at night.
A distant figure beneath moonlight.
A familiar stranger.
Most of the time, nothing extraordinary happens. Yet imagination quietly begins asking questions long before certainty arrives. Perhaps that is where the Noppera-bō truly lives.
Not upon lonely roads, but within the uncertainty of the human imagination itself. Artists throughout the Edo period often enjoyed painting the Noppera-bō.
Unlike dramatic monsters, its unsettling appearance required almost no detail. An ordinary traveler.
Simple clothing. Calm posture.
Only one impossible difference.
The missing face. That quiet contrast made the legend unusually memorable.
Even today, visitors walking through preserved streets in Kyoto, Kanazawa, quiet temple towns sometimes remark how peaceful the old roads become after sunset.
Paper lanterns glow softly.
Wooden buildings cast long shadows across stone paths. The world seems to slow.
It is easy to imagine another traveler quietly approaching from the opposite direction,
offering a gentle bow before continuing into the night. Perhaps the oldest stories simply encourage us to remain aware, not fearful, only attentive,
to notice the ordinary beauty surrounding us.
Because sometimes the greatest mysteries arrive dressed as completely ordinary moments. As midnight slowly settles across another quiet village, the streets become still once more. The lantern beside a small tea house burns gently. A cool breeze stirs the willow branches above the river.
Far ahead, a solitary traveler pauses upon the bridge, waiting quietly, almost as though expecting someone. You continue walking. Your footsteps echo softly against the old wooden planks.
The distance between you slowly closes. The traveler raises a hand in greeting,
then very slowly looks up, and for just a single heartbeat the peaceful silence of the night becomes filled with one final mystery, a face that was never there at all.
There is an old saying found in many parts of Japan that the quietest nights often hide the strangest stories. Not because darkness itself is dangerous, but because the world changes once most people have fallen asleep. The lanterns grow dim, the roads become empty, the sounds of everyday life slowly disappear. Only the wind, a distant call of an owl, and the whisper of bamboo moving gently beneath the moon remain. It was during these peaceful hours that people believed certain mysteries quietly awakened. Among them none appeared more ordinary or more surprising than the Rokurokubi. Unlike many yokai, Rokurokubi looked completely human throughout the day.
She spoke with her neighbors,
prepared meals, visited the local market, worked alongside everyone else. Nothing about her appearance suggested anything unusual.
She laughed. She smiled.
She lived an ordinary life.
No one suspected anything at all. Only after night had fully settled, when the house became silent and every lantern had been extinguished, did the old stories say her true nature quietly emerged.
As sleep embraced the village, her neck slowly began to stretch, longer and longer, until her head drifted silently through the darkness while the rest of her body remained peacefully asleep. It is one of the most unusual images in Japanese folklore.
Yet remarkably many of the oldest stories describe the Rokurokubi not as cruel but as mysterious. Some legends even suggest that she herself remained unaware of what happened during the night. Morning arrived.
Her neck returned to normal. Life continued exactly as before. The mystery belonged only to the hours between dusk and dawn.
Many historians believe these stories became especially popular during the Edo period.
Travel became easier. Cities grew larger. People encountered unfamiliar faces every day. Storytellers entertained visitors with strange tales collected from distant provinces. Among those stories, the Rokurokubi quietly found her place. Each region imagined her differently.
Some believed she wandered only within her own home.
Others claimed her floating head drifted through nearby forests beneath the moonlight. A few stories suggested she simply gazed peacefully across sleeping villages, curious about the quiet world unfolding while everyone else dreamed. Unlike ghosts seeking revenge, the Rokurokubi often seemed driven only by curiosity.
One well-known tale speaks of a traveling merchant who accepted shelter inside a country home after a long day's journey.
The family welcomed him warmly. A simple evening meal was shared. Conversation continued until the lantern burned low. Soon everyone retired for the night. Unable to sleep, the merchant quietly watched the moonlight entering through the paper screens.
Then, without warning, he noticed something impossible. The woman who had welcomed him earlier remained asleep upon her bedding.
Yet her head slowly lifted from the pillow. Her neck stretched farther and farther until it crossed the room entirely. The head drifted silently toward an open window as though drawn by the cool night air. The merchant remained perfectly still, too astonished even to speak. By morning everything appeared perfectly ordinary once more. The family prepared breakfast. The woman greeted him kindly. Nothing suggested the night's impossible event had ever taken place. The merchant quietly continued his journey, keeping the story to himself for many years afterward. Stories such as these rarely explain why the Rokurokubi exists. Instead, they quietly leave the mystery unresolved. Perhaps that uncertainty is exactly what makes the legend endure. Not every question requires an answer. Sometimes wonder itself becomes the story. Another variation tells of monks staying overnight in remote temples. Late into the evening they heard faint sounds moving through the wooden hallways.
A soft rustling, almost like cloth brushing against old timber.
When they investigated, nothing appeared unusual, only moonlight resting upon empty floors. Yet somewhere nearby someone always seemed to be watching. Whether these tales described the Rokurokubi or simply reflected the imagination awakened by lonely nights, no one can truly know.
Japanese folklore often blurs the line between dream and reality.
Many yokai appear during moments when people are tired, traveling, or alone.
Perhaps the stories remind us how different the world feels after midnight.
A familiar house sounds unfamiliar. Ordinary shadows appear slightly deeper. Silence itself becomes something almost tangible.
The Rokurokubi belongs perfectly within that atmosphere.
She is not a creature of loud terror. She is the quiet uncertainty that arrives when everything else has already gone to sleep.
Artists throughout Japan delighted in illustrating the Rokurokubi.
Some paintings showed her neck winding gently around wooden pillars. Others placed her beneath full moons overlooking peaceful gardens. Despite the strange image, many paintings remain surprisingly calm.
Almost elegant. The emphasis was never violence.
Only mystery. Today the Rokurokubi continues appearing throughout Japanese literature, films, and artwork.
Yet the oldest stories remain the gentlest.
Not tales of horror, but quiet reminders that even the most familiar places may still hold secrets waiting patiently beyond the edge of ordinary life. As midnight deepens over another peaceful village, the final lantern flickers softly before fading into darkness. Outside, a cool breeze moves across the garden. The moon rises above the rooftops. Inside one quiet wooden house, everyone appears fast asleep. The silence feels complete. Then, almost too slowly to notice, a shadow begins to move. Not across the floor, but gently upward, toward the pale moonlight waiting beyond the window. The village continues sleeping peacefully, unaware that somewhere above its rooftops another ancient story has quietly awakened beneath the stars. There are certain roads in Japan that seem almost unchanged by time. They wind quietly between old fields, pass beneath weathered stone bridges, disappear into bamboo groves where sunlight filters softly through the leaves. During the day they are peaceful places. Children walk home from school, farmers carry baskets toward nearby villages. Travelers pause beneath old trees to rest before continuing their journey. Yet once evening arrives, the same roads begin to feel entirely different. The familiar becomes unfamiliar. Shadows grow longer. The sound of distant streams carries farther through the cool night air. Every quiet footstep seems to echo just a little more than before. It was along roads such as these that people once spoke of meeting the Mujina.
Today the word Mujina usually refers to the Japanese badger,
a quiet woodland animal that still lives throughout many parts of the country. Yet within old folklore the meaning slowly became something far more mysterious.
The Mujina was not remembered for its appearance,
nor for great strength. Instead it became known for illusion, for making ordinary places feel strangely unfamiliar. Many stories involving the Mujina are remarkably simple. A traveler walks home after sunset. Nothing unusual has happened. The road is quiet.
The moon hangs peacefully above the trees.
Then someone appears ahead. Perhaps a lonely woman standing beside a bridge. Perhaps a traveler sitting quietly beneath a willow tree.
Perhaps an old monk looking toward the river.
Everything seems perfectly ordinary, until the traveler decides to step closer. The oldest versions rarely describe what happens next in great detail. Instead, the storyteller simply pauses, allowing the imagination to complete the mystery. Some tales say the figure quietly vanished.
Others insist the stranger was never truly human at all.
A few stories describe the encounter as strangely peaceful.
The traveler continued home, never fully understanding what had happened.
perhaps that uncertainty was always the point. Unlike many yokai, their Mujina rarely leaves behind clear answers. It leaves only questions.
One of the best-known stories was later retold by the writer Hitotsume-kozo. It tells of a man walking beside a lonely moat late one evening.
Ahead he notices a young woman kneeling near the water. She appears deeply distressed. Believing she may need help, he gently approaches. He offers comforting words. Slowly the woman turns toward him. Then she raises her hands to her face. In a single smooth motion everything disappears.
No eyes, no nose, no mouth.
Only smooth skin where a face should have been. Terrified, the man runs.
His heart races as he searches desperately for another person.
Eventually he reaches a small food stall.
The old vendor listens patiently as the frightened traveler struggles to explain what he has seen.
The vendor nods kindly, then quietly asks, "Did she look something like this?"
He slowly wipes a hand across his own face.
And it too disappears. For many years people believed this story belonged to the Mujina.
Later scholars suggested the faceless figure itself was actually a Noppera-bō, yet the confusion almost seems appropriate.
Japanese folklore has never existed as one fixed collection of stories.
Legends overlap.
They borrow from one another.
They quietly change as they pass from village to village.
Perhaps that is part of their charm. No two storytellers remember every detail exactly the same way.
The Mujina also became associated with the unexpected.
Not frightening surprises, but gentle reminders that certainty is often an illusion. A familiar road may appear different beneath moonlight.
A familiar tree may cast unfamiliar shadows.
The mind quietly fills empty spaces with possibilities. Many old storytellers understood this remarkably well. Fear does not always come from what we see. Sometimes it comes from what we cannot fully explain. Across Japan, badgers themselves are surprisingly shy animals.
They leave their burrows after sunset,
moving silently through forests and quiet countryside. Most people never notice them. Perhaps generations ago, a brief glimpse of one disappearing into tall grass was enough to inspire another story. Reality and imagination once again walking side by side. Even today there are places where old stone roads remain much as they were centuries ago. Ancient bridges still cross narrow rivers.
Bamboo groves still whisper gently in the evening breeze.
The night still transforms familiar landscapes into places filled with quiet possibility. Standing there listening to the sounds of insects beneath a clear sky becomes easy to understand why travelers once believed someone unseen might be sharing the road beside them.
Not with harmful intentions, not seeking to chase anyone away.
Only quietly reminding those who walked these paths that the world has always held room for mystery.
As the night slowly deepens, the final lantern in the distant village grows dim.
The road ahead disappears into silver moonlight. The bamboo sways gently. A cool wind carries the scent of damp earth through the trees.
For a brief moment you think you hear another pair of footsteps. Soft, unhurried, keeping perfect pace beside your own.
When you stop, the sound disappears. When you begin walking again, it quietly returns. Perhaps it is only the echo of your own journey, or perhaps somewhere upon the peaceful roads of old Japan the Mujina is still wandering beneath the moon, never asking to be understood, only quietly reminding every traveler that not every mystery is meant to be solved. Some are simply meant to accompany us until the morning light gently finds its way home. There are few things more ordinary than hearing footsteps in an old wooden temple.
The gentle creak of polished floorboards, the soft rustle of robes brushing against timber,
a breeze slipping quietly through paper screens. For centuries these sounds accompanied everyday life throughout Japan. Monks welcomed travelers seeking shelter. Pilgrims paused to rest before continuing their journey. Children occasionally wandered into temple gardens while chasing dragonflies during the warm months.
Temples were places of peace.
Places where the noise of the outside world slowly faded away. Yet among the many gentle stories told about these quiet places, one small yokai appeared again and again.
The Hitotsume-kozo, the one-eyed boy, Unlike many spirits of Japanese folklore, their Hitotsume-kozo was rarely described as frightening.
In fact, many old stories portray him as almost shy.
He appeared as a young boy, dressed in the simple robes of a novice monk. His hands rested calmly at his sides. His expression remained gentle. Only one detail seemed unusual. At the center of his face, instead of two eyes, there was only one.
Large,
round,
quietly watching the world. Perhaps because the image was so unexpected, the Hitotsume-kozo became one of Japan's most recognizable yokai.
Not because he inspired terror, but because he inspired surprise.
Many encounters began in exactly the same way. A traveler arrived at a temple after sunset.
The day's journey had been long.
The mountain air had grown cool. A kind monk offered a warm meal, a place beside the fire, and a room for the night.
Everything felt peaceful.
The temple settled into silence.
Lanterns slowly dimmed.
Rain tapped gently upon the roof.
Sometime during the night, the traveler heard soft footsteps outside.
Curious, they opened the sliding door. Standing quietly in the hallway was a small child.
He neither smiled nor frowned. He simply looked back.
For a brief moment, nothing seemed unusual.
Then the lantern light caught his face.
Only one eye gazed calmly into the darkness.
The child bowed politely, turned, and disappeared around the corner.
By morning, no trace remained. When the traveler asked the monks about the mysterious child, some simply smiled.
Others quietly changed the subject.
A few nodded gently, as though the story had been told many times before. Unlike other yokai, their Hitotsume-kozo almost never caused harm.
He did not chase travelers. He did not steal belongings. He did not lead people astray. He simply appeared,
allowed himself to be seen, and vanished once more. It is a wonderfully gentle kind of mystery.
Perhaps the purpose was never to frighten,
only to remind people that the world still held quiet surprises.
Historians believe stories of one-eyed beings existed in Japan long before the Hitotsume-kozo took its familiar form.
Ancient legends occasionally spoke of unusual mountain spirits possessing only one eye.
Over time, those older beliefs gradually blended with Buddhist temples, village traditions, and the imagination of storytellers.
Eventually, the childlike figure known today quietly emerged.
Artists especially enjoyed painting the Hitotsume-kozo.
Unlike fierce dragons or towering demons, he often appeared carrying a small paper lantern,
or standing beneath a broad umbrella while rain fell softly around him.
Some paintings showed him watching fireflies drift above temple ponds. Others placed him beneath maple trees as autumn leaves floated gently to the ground.
There is almost always a peacefulness surrounding him.
Perhaps because he never seems to belong entirely to either the human world or the world of spirits.
He simply exists somewhere in between. Even today, visitors exploring old temples across Japan often notice how calm these places become after sunset. Stone pathways cool beneath the evening air.
Cicadas gradually fall silent.
Temple bells echo slowly across nearby forests.
The buildings themselves seem to settle into restful silence. Standing there, it becomes surprisingly easy to imagine an old story beginning once again.
Not with thunder,
not with danger, only with the quiet sound of small footsteps somewhere beyond the lantern's gentle glow. As the moon rises above the temple roof, the final visitors begin their journey home. The gardens grow still. The incense has long since faded into the cool night air. Somewhere deep within the wooden halls, a single floorboard creaks softly, almost too softly to notice.
Then another.
For just a moment, a small figure appears at the end of the corridor.
A child no taller than the lantern beside him. He pauses,
looks quietly in your direction with his single curious eye, offers the slightest bow before disappearing once more into the peaceful silence of the ancient temple. And by the time the first birds welcome the coming dawn, only the memory of that quiet encounter remains. Like so many of Japan's oldest stories, gentle enough to wander about long after the night has passed. Far beyond the mountains, beyond the villages, and beyond the quiet forests where so many yokai were said to dwell, another world waited.
The sea. To the people of ancient Japan, the ocean was both generous and unpredictable.
It offered fish in abundance,
connected distant islands,
carried merchants across the waves,
and sustained countless coastal villages. Yet it also demanded respect. Storms appeared without warning.
Thick fog raised the horizon. Calm waters could become restless before anyone understood why. For generations, fishermen learned never to underestimate the sea. And perhaps because of its endless mystery, the ocean eventually found its own yokai. Among them, few were spoken of with greater wonder than the Umibōzu. Unlike many spirits that wandered forests or mountain paths, the Umibōzu belonged entirely to open water. It rarely approached the shore. It preferred the quiet places where land disappeared from sight and only the endless rhythm of the waves remained.
Many sailors described remarkably similar encounters.
The day would begin peacefully.
Gentle winds filled the sails.
The sea shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. Seabirds circled overhead. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary.
Then, without warning, the wind stopped.
The waves became strangely still. Even the birds disappeared.
Experienced sailors knew this silence. It was different.
The sea had become too quiet. Moments later, dark shapes slowly rose from the water. Not with violence, not with great splashes, only slowly, as though it had always been there beneath the surface. Its enormous head emerged first.
Round, dark, smooth,
resembling the shaved head of a Buddhist monk.
It was this appearance that gave the spirit its name, Umibōzu, the sea monk. No one could say exactly how large it truly was.
Some claimed only its head appeared above the waves. Others insisted its body disappeared into depths too vast to imagine. The sea concealed everything beneath it, and perhaps that uncertainty made the legend even more powerful.
Unlike many yokai, the Umibōzu spoke very little.
Some stories say it remained completely silent.
Others claim it asked passing sailors for a bucket, a simple wooden bucket. Those who handed over an ordinary bucket soon watched in horror as the Umibōzu used it to scoop seaward or endlessly into the boat.
Little by little the vessel grew heavier.
Water collected around the sailors' feet.
The sea slowly reclaimed what humanity had borrowed.
Yet another version tells a different story. Wise sailors carried a bucket with no bottom. When the Umibōzu requested it, they offered this unusual gift. The spirit calmly accepted it, poured water into the bucket,
and watched as it flowed endlessly back into the sea. Satisfied, the great figure quietly disappeared beneath the waves once again.
The sailors continued their journey in peace. Like so many Japanese folktales, the lesson was not one of strength. It was one of calm thinking.
Panic rarely solved difficult situations.
Patience often did.
Many historians believe stories of the Umibōzu reflected the genuine uncertainty of life at sea. Long before modern navigation, fishermen depended entirely upon experience.
Clouds, wind,
the color of the water, the flight of seabirds. Every small detail mattered. When storms arrived unexpectedly, people naturally searched for explanations. The Umibōzu became one way of giving shape to the ocean's enormous power. Not as an enemy, but as something impossible to fully understand. Even today, anyone who has stood upon a quiet shoreline after sunset knows the feeling. The ocean stretches endlessly toward the horizon,
dark,
silent,
almost without movement.
Somewhere beyond sight, entire worlds exist beneath the surface, creatures never seen,
currents never noticed,
depths impossible to measure. It becomes easy to understand why generations before imagined great spirits rising from those waters. Japanese artists often painted the Umibōzu emerging beneath storm-filled skies, its great head towering above fragile wooden boats. Yet even these paintings rarely emphasized violence. Instead, they captured scale, the overwhelming feeling of standing before something vastly older and greater than ourselves. Perhaps that has always been the true meaning of the Umibōzu.
Not a monster waiting to attack,
but a reminder. The sea deserves respect. Its generosity should never be mistaken for weakness. Its calmness should never be mistaken for certainty. As night slowly settles across the open ocean, the final colors of sunset disappear beyond the horizon. The sails grow still. The water reflects a sky filled with countless stars. Far from any village, far from any shore, the world becomes wonderfully quiet. Only the gentle sound of waves remains. Then for just a moment the sea grows perfectly still. No wind,
No birds.
no movement at all. The sailors glance toward the dark horizon. Something seems to be rising slowly from beneath the water. A great rounded silhouette, calm, silent, watching. And before the first breeze returns to fill the sails once more, it sinks gently back into the endless sea, leaving behind nothing except ripples spreading quietly beneath the moonlit sky.